Chloe from Gabby and Chloe Time, and before I get started reading The Wild Robot by Peter Brown, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. And just like the last video, please ignore this bookmark and please ignore the noise. My dad's exercising. So let's get started. So last time we ended up on Chapter 5, the robot gravesite, so let's get started. Those otters were now hiding behind a rock. The round heads nervously poked up, and they watched a sparkling monster emerge from the crate. The monster slowly turned her head as she scanned the coastline. Her head turned and turned all the way around, and it didn't stop turning until she was looking right at the otters. "Hello, otters. My name is Roz." The robot voice was simply too much for the skittish creatures. The biggest otter squeaked, and the whole gang suddenly took off. They galloped back across the robot gravesite, flopped into the ocean, and raced through the waves just as fast as they could. Roz watched the otters go. Her eyes lingered on the sparkly objects that littered the shore. The objects looked strangely familiar. The robot swung her left leg forward and her right. Just like that, she was taking her very first step. She stomped away from her crate over the rocks and through the gravesite until she was standing above a broken robot body. She leaned in and noticed the word Rosum lightly a sheet on the torso. She noticed the same word on the torsos, on all the torsos, including her own. Roz continued exploring the gravesite with a playful little ocean wave washed over the rocks. She automatically stepped away from it. Then a bigger wave sloshed toward her. She stepped away again. And then a gigantic wave crashed over the rocks and engulfed the entire gravesite. Heavy water pounded against her body and knocked her to the ground, and her damaged sensors flared for the first time. A moment later, the wave was gone, and Roz lay there, dripping and dented and surrounded by dead robots. Roz could feel her survival instincts, the part of her computer brain that made her want to avoid danger and take care of herself so she could continue functioning properly. Her instincts was urging her to move away from the ocean. She carefully got to her feet and saw that high above the shore, the land was bursting with trees and grasses and flowers. It looked lush and safe up there. It looked like a much better place for our robot. She just had one problem: to get up there. She would have to climb the sea cliffs. Chapter 6, The Climb. Crack, thun, clang. Roz was having a little trouble climbing the cliff. She had a new dent on her rear and a scrape down her side, and she was just about to get another ding when a crab scuttled out from another piece of the driftwood. The crab looked up and immediately showed off his giant claws. Everyone was afraid of his claws, but not the robot. She looked down and introduced herself. "Hello, crab. My name is Roz." After a brief standoff, the crab cautiously backed away, and that's when Roz noticed how easily he moved over the rocks. With his wide stance and his gribby feet, the crab could crawl up and down any rock face. So Roz decided to try out his climbing technique. She spread her arms wide and clamped each of her hands onto the cliffside. She jammed one foot into the crack, lifted another foot into a narrow ledge, and just like that, she was climbing. Roz moved awkwardly at first. A chunk of rock crumbled in her hand. She had trouble finding footholds, but as she climbed higher and higher, she started to get the hang of it. The seagulls squawked from their cliff nets and soared away when the robot came too close. But Roz paid them no mind. She was focused only on getting at the top. Up and up, and up she went, methodically climbing past nets and ledges and tiny trees rooted in the cracks. and before long, our robot felt the soft soil of the island beneath her feet. Chapter 7, The Wilderness. Animal sounds fill the forest, chirps and wing beats, and rustling in the underbrush. And then, from the sea cliffs, there came new sounds, heavy and crunching footsteps. The forest animals fell quiet, and from their hiding places, they watched a sparkling monster stomp past. The forest was not a comfortable place for Roz. The jagged rods and fallen trees and tangled underbrush made it difficult for her to walk. She stumbled along, struggling to keep her balance, until her foot snagged and she toppled over like a piece of timber. It wasn't a bad fall, no dings, no dents, just dirt. But Roz were programmed to keep herself in good working order, and once she was back on her feet and immediately began cleaning herself off. Her hands darted around her body, quickly brushing and picking up every speck of dirt. There's a Roz. Only when the robot was sparkling again did she continue through the forest. Roz stumbled on until she found a patch of grass that was flat and open and carpeted with pine needles. It seemed like a safe place, and safety was all the robot really wanted. So she stood there, motionless, all perfect lines and angles set against the interior shapes of the wilderness. Chapter 8, The Pine Cones. If you stand in a forest long enough, eventually something will fall on you. And Roz had been standing in the forest long enough. And gentle wind whispered through the treetops, and then thunk! A pine cone bounced off her head. The robot looked down and watched the pine cone roll to a stop. It seemed harmless, so Roz went back to doing nothing. A few hours later, a gust of wind rushed through the treetops, and then thunk! The robot looked down as another pine cone rolled away. Then a few hours after that, howling wind tore through the treetops, then bent the trunks and shook branches, and then thunk, thunk, thunk. Pine cones began raining down. Thunk, thunk. Roz felt something like annoyance. Thunk. She quickly scanned the area for anywhere safe from pine cones. She spotted the perfect place when she looked up at a huge rocky shape that towered above the forest. Chapter 9, The Mountain. Roz was now stomping her way up the mountain. Dense forest and rocky outcrops forced the robot to zig and zag, backtrack. But after an hour of steady hiking, she arrived at craggy mountain peak. Grasses and flowers and shrubs sprouted from every pocket of soil, but there were no trees at the top. Roz was safe from the annoying pine cones. She dusted herself off and then carefully climbed up a leaning slab of stone to the very highest point of the entire mountain. The robot slowly turned her head completely around. She saw the ocean stretching towards the horizon in every direction. That moment, Roz learned what you and I have known since the beginning of the story. That in that moment, Roz finally realized that she was on an island. Roz looked down and surveyed the island. Starting from the sandy southern point, the island grew wider and greener and hillier when it finally jutted up the rocky cone of the mountain. In some places of the mountain fell away, leaving sheer cliffs. A waterfall rushed off one cliff and fed a river that wound its way through a great meadow in the center of the island. The river flowed past the wildflowers and ponds and boulders and then disappeared into the rainforest. Blurry shapes suddenly cut through the robot's vision. She refocused her eyes and saw vultures circling through the foothills. Then she noticed lizards warming themselves on distant rock. A badger peeked out from a berry bush. A moose waded through a stream. A flock of sparrows turned in perfect unison above the trees. The island was teeming with life, and now it had a new kind of life, a strange kind of life. artificial lights. Chapter 10, The Reminder. I should remind you, reader, that Roz had no idea how she had come to be on that island. She didn't know that she'd been built in a factory and then stored in a warehouse before crossing the ocean on a cargo ship. She didn't know that a hurricane had sunk the ship and left her crate floating on the waves for days until it finally washed ashore. She didn't know that she'd been accidentally activated by those curious sea otters. As the robot looked out at the island, it never even encountered to her that she might not belong there. As far as Roz knew, she was home. Chapter 11. Okay, so this is all we're gonna read today. Let me put our cute little bookmark here. So I hope you like this video, guys, and please comment down below which series of books do you like the best. Do you like the One and Only Ivan, or do you like the Wild Robot? And I'll see you guys next time.